Welcome, everybody, to Tino's Time. And on this episode, we are going to recap round one of the NFL Fantasy Football Playoffs, and then we're going to cover round two. We're going to get you ready to set your lineups if you made it. But if not, why don't you still listen? Because it's always time to look forward to next year and start your scouting. So let's not waste any more time and let's get into everything that happened in a wild Week 16 that was the first round of the NFL Fantasy Football Playoffs. The Lions beat the Cardinals 30-12. The Cardinals ruined our lives, and the Detroit Lions were the team that had the most fantasy points out of almost everybody this week. We saw Craig Reynolds go off. We saw St. Brown go off. We saw a bunch of Lions players that people probably didn't even start unless you were completely desperate go off, and the Cardinals were the team that we were relying on to lead us to the second round, and that did not just happen. I guess that's why they call it Any Given Sunday. The weirdest week in the NFL. We saw so many no-name guys, hashtag that helps no one. We saw Duke Johnson get 2 touchdowns. We saw guys that we weren't even starting get touchdowns. It was ridiculous. Justin Fields was the number 9 overall quarterback this week in fantasy, and he only had 19 points. This is probably one of the worst week in fantasies I've ever seen at the quarterback position. It was just awful. You had to have the best luck in the world to get through this week. But if you were able to get through this week, especially with all of the COVID issues, we still have a big issue with COVID. There's been over 100 players in the last 2 weeks that have been placed and taken off of the COVID list, and it's just one of those things. It's still a big issue, and in the fantasy football playoffs last week, it was one of the things I've never seen happen before, where we didn't know who was going to start, and Tyler Huntley ended up being one of the best quarterbacks this week in fantasy, and nobody knew that he was going to do that good. But it's crazy to see, and COVID is still a big issue that you have to worry about. So we'll be talking about it when we get to the injuries, about all the people that are on the COVID list and stuff like that. So keep an eye on it, and like I always say, it's Wednesday. The week starts tomorrow. Remember, this is the only day without football this week. We have football Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday. So you have to make sure you keep an eye on everything going on, especially if you want to get that championship or you want to move on to the championship. And speaking of that, it's either the semifinals or it's championship week this week. And it's one of those things, like I said last week, you got to set the players, set the right lineups, and make sure you have all the guys in that you want to start and you feel comfortable starting. So let's get into all the stuff that happened on Monday and Tuesday. Yes, I said that. We had Tuesday football this week, people. We talked about it, as I said, right now, a second ago. COVID has been a huge issue, and last week we saw over 47 plus players go on the COVID list being taken off. We saw so many big people's names like Jalen Waddle go on the COVID list, Taylor Heineke. There were so many guys, and there's so many guys that were added on yesterday that we'll talk about before the Tuesday night games. But we had 4 games on Monday, and Tuesday, 2 on each day. The first one, it was supposed to happen on Saturday, but if you keep up on the NFL and you know what's going on, it got postponed because there were so many people on the COVID list. Baker Mayfield was out in this game, Austin Hooper, Jarvis Landry, Kareem Hunt. There were so many guys, and this is a game they pushed back a few days. This is, like I said, supposed to happen on Saturday. And the Browns ended up losing the game 16-14 over the Raiders, and the Raiders are staying in the playoff hunt. Nick Chubb had a really good game. He had 91 yards and 1 touchdown. Derek Carr, he had 236 yards with 1 touchdown and 1 interception. Josh Jacobs, he had 52 yards rushing, 3 receptions, and 42 receiving yards. And, it's one of those things that the Raiders have not been that team. Hunter Renfrow is the one guy that I was really relying on this week, and we thought he was going to go off. He only had 3 receptions for 32 yards. Zay Jones actually had the better game. He had 6 receptions for 67 yards, and it's just, This game was so back and forth, and it wasn't like it was. I thought it was going to be a better game, but with all of the COVID injuries, we saw Nick Mullins start for the Browns, and to be honest, Nick Mullins didn't have a bad game at all. I didn't even know he was on the Browns until they said it. I thought he was still on the 49ers backing up Jimmy Garoppolo, but Nick Mullins proved that, even if Baker is out, yes, the Browns have they have to climb a higher ladder to get to the playoffs now, because if they would have won this game, they would have been the first in the AFC in their division. But they did not, and now the Raiders move up in the playoff race, and it's going to be interesting. This is probably the first time I've ever seen the playoffs be like this. The other game on Monday was the Vikings versus the Chicago Bears. Yes, my Chicago Bears. Always got to support my Chicago Bears no matter how bad they are. This is a game, though, that I felt like should have got pushed back, because we saw so many COVID people being put on the COVID list, but the Bears didn't even have a secondary, and they didn't push back the game, and I get it. It's Monday night and everything like that, but you were willing to push back other games, and it just didn't make any sense to me. But let me tell you, in this game, the backups for the Bears defense made it. They did very well for what they were doing. The Vikings should not have won this game 17-9. They should have won it 35-10. Let's be real here. Justin Jefferson should have went off. KJ Osborne should have went off. Dalvin Cook should have went off, and it just did not happen. Kirk Cousins didn't even throw for 100 yards. He threw for 87 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Dalvin Cook only had 89 rushing yards. Justin Jefferson only had 4 receptions for 47 yards. And I'm not saying that it's like a bad thing. I just think that, it should have been a better stat-wise and a better game from the Vikings, and the Bears had it. The Bears didn't turn over the ball, and the Bears don't go for it on 3 or 4 downs in a row. They might have actually won this game. But Justin Fields at the end of the game, I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden he started throwing dimes left and right, and he was moving the ball up and down the field. He finished the game with 285 yards. He threw a touchdown with 0 seconds left on the clock, which helped me take the lead in one of my leagues, even though the bad man, Cooper Kupp, that we'll be talking about in the game in a minute, he went off. And when I talk about Cooper Kupp, we'll get there. But at the time, Justin Fields was helping me have a 26-point lead. David Montgomery, he didn't have a great game, but he had an okay game. He had 60 rushing yards, 5 receptions, and 23 receiving yards. That's not bad. A little bit of a humble brag last week. I told you to stream Cole Kmet, and he didn't have like a phenomenal Mark Andrews type game, but he had 6 receptions for 71 yards, and that's 13.1 points from a tight end on Monday night, and I'll take that all day long. Darnell Mooney continues to be the Bears' number 1 and Justin Fields' number 1. He had 5 receptions for 63 yards. And, honestly, Darnell Mooney is somebody I would continue to use in your flex, because he's just that really good player, and him and Justin Fields have just a really good connection. The next game, the Tuesday night games, they were supposed to happen on Sunday, but because of the COVID outbreak and everything, these 2 games got pushed to Tuesday night. And I always love having Tuesday night football. We saw it was Washington FT versus the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Rams versus the Seahawks. And let's talk about Washington FT versus the Eagles real quick, because we talked about Tyler Heineke, and he was on the COVID list, and he was, he wasn't able to play. So we saw Gilbert, they picked him up off of the practice squad, and I think he was honestly on the street a few weeks ago. But, he didn't have a really bad game at all. He moved the ball up and down the field. But Antonio Gibson, he didn't have he didn't have a banger game, but he put up 26 rushing yards. He did get 1 touchdown, but in the passing game, he got 6 more receptions, which is 6 more points, and he got 39 receiving yards. So I'll take that all day, and that touchdown definitely helped. But from Gibson, for a guy that's been coming along, and this is what I was really worried about with them starting their third string quarterback and just not having a good quarterback, but Gibson showed up. Scary Terry, on the other hand, though, if you were relying on this man to help you, he only got 7.1 points, and he just didn't do his thing. But on the other side of the ball for the Eagles, if you started Jalen Hurts, you got to love having Jalen Hurts as your quarterback, because he put up 296 yards. He had 1 passing touchdown, 1 interception, but he had 38 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. And, hey, if Jalen Hurts wants to be quarterback, running back, I'm all about it all day long. So that works. Dallas Goddard, though, was the biggest representative of the Philadelphia Eagles receiving squad. He had 7 receptions for 135 yards. And if you have Dallas Goddard and how bad the tight end position has been this year, you're feeling real good after starting him on Tuesday night. And hey, maybe he led you and led you to make it to the championship, or he led you to the next round. Devontae Smith, though, he was a guy who's finally getting going. In the last few weeks, he's going up and down. He had 3 receptions for 40 yards and 7 points. And, and that's not great. That's not good, but it's not. It just, I was really hoping for more from him. And if he would have got a little bit more, I might have actually won. But I went up against Cooper Kupp and Jonathan Taylor, and that's just what happens. That's why you just never know in fantasy. You never give up. Speaking of Cooper Kupp and the Rams, let's talk about this Rams and Seahawks game. The Rams ended up winning the game 20-10 over the Seattle Seahawks, and Russell Wilson just continues to struggle. Russ, I don't know what's going on with you, man, but you've been a huge disappointment this year. You had 156 passing yards. You didn't have any touchdowns. You did throw an interception. You didn't have very many rushing yards. And it just has been a huge disappointment all season long. And that was a big reason on why Seattle lost. We all started Rashad Penny, but DJ Dallas decided to get the 1 touchdown for the Seattle Seahawks. He has 41 yards and 1 touchdown, and he had a better game than Rashad Penny. I don't know what it is, but I got eliminated because of that, and it's frustrating, people. I put so much effort into this every single year, and it sucks when I made all the bad decisions this week, and that was just one that just really frustrated me. This one, too, Gerald Everett, I faced him in one of my other leagues, and he eliminated me also. He had 4 receptions and 60 yards, and that might not seem like a lot, but in our league, it was 8 points, and that's all he needed to win, and it was just, I was hoping for not that good of a game. On the other side of the ball for the Rams, though, the Rams put up 20 points. Matthew Stadford continues his hot run and just continues to put up steady numbers. He had 244 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Sony Michelle, even though Darrell Henderson Jr. returned, Sony Michelle seemed to have the better game. He had 92 rushing yards. He had some receptions, and he had a lot of receiving yards. So Sony Michelle, honestly, if you have him still, I would maybe consider flexing him this week and because he seems like he's getting the most production from the running back game, or maybe they just wanted to ease Darrell Henderson Jr. back in. But right now, Sony is the running back I trust in the Rams. But let's take a second and let's just praise this man. He is the MVP of the league. He's the MVP of fantasy. And if you drafted this man, he's leading you to a championship. Cooper Kupp has been one of the best wide receivers in the game this year. I have not seen anybody play this good, and he is at he's almost at 1,500 yards, or he might have eclipsed that after last night. He had 9 receptions for 136 yards and 2 touchdowns. He put up 31 fantasy points, and he led probably a lot of people to move on to the championship or the semifinals. Or maybe you had him and you were sitting on a bye and he still scored 31 points for you. It's ridiculous. Cooper Kupp, just give the man the MVP trophy and let's call it a day, because this man's leading you to a ring and he's going to be celebrating in a few weeks and you're just going to be like, I love you, Cooper Kupp. It's starting to feel like Thaddeus from the Avengers with Cooper Kupp, and it's crazy. But Cooper Kupp, you're just a bad man. And after we talked about 4 games that happened on Monday and Tuesday, let's go back to Sunday and let's keep going. And we're not gonna get too sad, but we have to talk about it, because now that going into round 2 of the playoffs, you got to know about all these guys, and there are so many other guys on the injury list that you'll have to keep an eye on it, and there were just too many names for me to write down, so I just wrote a lot of the big names down to let everybody know. But just keep an eye on it, because every single day we see people getting put on the COVID list, taken off the COVID list, injuries, hamstrings, everything. It's ridiculous. So let's start off with the quarterbacks that were injured either this week or we got some news on them. Daniel Jones is out for the year, so it looks like Mike Glennon will be the starter for the New York Giants the rest of the year. So whatever team is facing the Giants, like this week, we'll be talking about the Eagles a little bit later on. I'd go pick up the Eagles defense and start them this week versus Mike Glennon, because the Giants are a disaster with Daniel Jones, and they're not much better with Mike Glennon. So make sure you pick up the Eagles defense, and I'll be making sure I tell you that in a little bit. Baker Mayfield had COVID, and we talked about him a little bit earlier, so he's one of those guys you also have to keep an eye on. Nick Mullins didn't play bad on Monday, but if Baker is good to go on Christmas versus the Packers, then it's one of those things you have to keep an eye on, and just, because also all of the Browns playmakers. This one, though, Teddy Bridgewater, get well soon, my man. You were carted off the field. We saw too many people carted off the field on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. It was just not okay. So Teddy, he is in stable condition. He was released from the hospital. He will be in concussion protocol, and probably Drew Lock will start this week for the Broncos. I don't see them after that way that was, and if he does, I'll be giving Teddy some props on Sunday, because I just don't see him playing at all. The running backs now, Fournette, he left the game on Sunday night, Leonard Fournette did, and Ronald Jones, Rojo, came in the game, and he had a really good game. We'll be talking about him in the waiver wires pickups in a little bit, but if Leonard Fournette is out, it's a huge loss for the fantasy playoffs. Joe Mixon, also, he has an ankle injury, and it's one of those things, like I always say, I record on Tuesday, so keep an eye on it, and just make sure you just see. Tyreek Hill went on the COVID list on Monday. Everybody take a chill. It's Monday. Hopefully he can get taken off, but if not, we'll have to see, and like I said, just keep an eye on it. One awful injury that happened on Sunday, Chris Godwin, he is out for the season with a torn ACL, and it's one of those things that it's a huge loss, but the way the injuries have been going this year, it sucks to see a guy like this go down, especially, like I said, in the fantasy playoffs, and the Bucs are trying to make a playoff run. Speaking of the Bucs, it seemed like everybody on the Bucs went down on Sunday. Mike Evans also left with a hamstring injury. It is not considered to be too serious, but hamstrings are just difficult, and you just never know if he can re-aggravate it into a game. And if it's just one of those things, you don't want to be starting guys that are possibly hurt in the championship or the semifinals, because then if they go out, you're screwed. Sterling Shepard has a torn Achilles, and he's out for the year. We really weren't starting Sterling Shepard. Get well soon, my guy, though. Julio Jones. Julio, the last 3 seasons, you've been awfully injured and awfully hurt all season long, and I don't know what's going on, but I hope you're able to get back on the field soon. You have a hamstring, and I can't trust Julio right now. A.J. Brown, though, on the other side of the injury list, he's been designated to return from the IR, and that would be a huge lift for the Tennessee Titans as they go up against the 49ers this week on Thursday, tomorrow. Can't even believe tomorrow's Thursday already. We're getting right back to football. Today's the only day with football, and it's beautiful. But A.J. Brown, you're back, my guy, and finally we got some good injury news. But people... One of the best tight ends in the game went on the COVID list yesterday, Travis Kelce. They also put their kicker, Harrison Buckner, on the COVID list too, and those are huge 2 names. And if Travis Kelce is out this week, I'll be telling you some tight ends and stuff to stream and start and stuff a little bit later on. But Travis Kelce is one of those guys, if you're missing him in the semifinals or the championship, it's just a big loss, and you're not going to be able to find the same production as you would from other guys. Austin Hooper was put on the COVID list, and David Ajoko didn't have a great game, but he did put up okay numbers, and that's something else we have to keep an eye on. Probably the rookie of the year in the tight end position. We all thought it was going to be Kyle Pitts, but it's ending up being Pat Freiermuth, but now he is in the concussion protocol, and it's just something that we have to keep an eye on because, I record on Tuesday, and you always want to make sure that you keep up on the injuries. And I'm sorry, I keep saying Tuesday today. I'm off 2 people. It's Wednesday today. Make sure you keep an eye on that even more because games start tomorrow. Second round starts tomorrow. There's no waiting and no more things. But if you weren't able to make it to the second round like I wasn't in 2 out of 3 of my leagues, 2 out of 4 of my leagues, or 3 out of 4, I made 2, I advanced in 2, and I didn't advance, okay, so 2 out of 4, I advanced in 2 out of 4, But if you were not able to advance in any of your leagues, these guys were probably a big reason why. Kyler Murray only had 12.5 points, and the Lions just played defense left and right. Tom Brady had 4.76 points, and that was just, I don't know what was going on, but the Saints were playing great defense, and yeah. Taysom Hill, he was putting up 27-plus points all season long, the 2 games that he started, but he only put up 9.46 points, and if you started those 3 quarterbacks, they probably eliminated you, and now you're sitting at home listening to me and being like, why do I got to listen to you now? Because I don't even have to set my lineup. But again, like I said, you're always able to look forward to next year, and you always want to start doing scouting as early as you can because you just never know. Some of these guys that break out later in the season or in the playoffs become and able to become out big stars. Now let's talk about the running backs that struggled. Alvin Kamara only had 5.1 points, and he just did not do very well. And Alvin Kamara is one of those guys that we've been relying on all season long, and I thought he was going to have a bit better game, but the Saints just could not get going, and it was 9-0, and there was just no offense. Naji Harris, the best running back, probably the rookie running back at running back, or the best rookie running back in the game this year. Naji Harris only put up 4.6 points. And if you started him, you're probably not moving on. Cordell Patterson, what is going on with you, my guy? You only put up 4.3 points. You have not been as good as you were the last 3 or 4 weeks. And I got lucky enough in one of my leagues to have the guy that went off at the tight end position. And we'll be talking about him when we get to the studs of the week. But Cordell Patterson, you need to put up better numbers than 4.3 points. Joe Mixon only put up 7 points, and that whole Bengals offense just seems like it's lost. And like I said, it was one of the weirdest weeks in the NFL, and I've just never seen anything like this. Brandon Ayuk, he only had 4.6 points also, and it seemed like there was a lot of guys that had 4.6 points for some reason. Maybe that was just the thing this week. I don't know, but it was just crazy. Jamar Chase, another guy. Do I need to worry about you? Because you only had 1 catch for 3 yards. That's something that I ain't going to chill, brah. I ain't going to do nothing about because you were the best wide receiver rookie this year. You were having phenomenal games. I traded for you, and then you do this? I need you to do better. I need to make the championship. You better put up better numbers than 1.3 points, or I'm not keeping you next year, Jamar Chase. Jerry Jeudy didn't even catch a ball. He put up a big goose egg, and he put up 0 points. Drew Lock just looked lost, and the Broncos just can't find a quarterback at all. That's why you need to go out and get Aaron Rodgers, Broncos. Go get Aaron Rodgers and take him out of Green Bay and help my Bears win the division for once. Speaking of the Packers, I want to give a congratulations to the Green Bay Packers for being the first team to clinch a playoff spot this year in the NFL. But back to the disappointments. The biggest disappointment, in my opinion, at the tight end position was Rob Gronkowski. We were hoping for him and Tom Brady to put up these phenomenal numbers on Sunday night, and it just did not happen at all. He only caught the ball a few times. He had 39 receiving yards, and it just was not okay. So if you had any of those guys, hopefully you were able to have a few guys in studs of the week that helped you get points from the guys that struggled. But I'm sorry if you were not able to advance. Then, like I said, it's always okay to do your scouting for the following season. And, you could still do daily fantasy. If you do daily fantasy, that's always fun. I struggle at it because of the salary cap, but that's okay. If people have fun doing it, then do it, because fantasy football is still around. And then they do the playoff challenge. You can do fantasy football all the way until the football season's over. But if you're still alive in the fantasy football playoffs and you're moving on to the championship or the semifinals, let's talk about these guys that helped you and they led you to a W and a dub this week, and they led you to the next round. Patrick Mahomes, we're going all the way back to Thursday night. He put up 410 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. He had 32 rushing yards. He did have 1 fumble, but he put up 44.8 points. And if you had Patrick Mahomes on Thursday night, you were feeling real good. And if you had Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, you got 80 points on Thursday night, and you were like, I took this dub already. I don't even need to do anything. Travis Kelce had 10 receptions, 191 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 41.1 points. So you actually got about 86 points for Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes if you had both of them. So if you were able to stack both of them, you were feeling real good after Thursday night. Mark Andrews, thank you, Mark Andrews. You were the reason why I moved on into the semifinals in one of my leagues. He had 10 receptions, 136 receiving yards from Tyler Huntley, 2 touchdowns, and 35.6 points. Mark Andrews, you had yourself a game. And speaking of Tyler Huntley, who thought Tyler Huntley was going to put up the same amount of numbers as Patrick Mahomes? He didn't have the same amount of passing yards. He only had 215 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. He did have 73 rushing yards, but he had 4 total touchdowns. He had 2 passing and 2 rushing, and he put up 44.2 points. So if you were lucky enough and you thought, hey, I'm going to take a chance on Tyler Huntley, he probably led you to a victory, and you're like, I'm the smartest man alive. But don't be, let's see what happens. Hopefully Lamar gets back this week. Don't be crazy. But if Tyler Huntley does start next week, I would consider starting him, especially in 2 quarterback leagues. Brandon Cooks went out and put on a show himself. He had 7 receptions for 102 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 29.2 points. And Brandon Cooks has been that guy all year that has been very consistent no matter who the quarterback is in the Texans. Hunter Henry had 6 receptions for 77 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had 25.7 points, and tight end position is so hard to come by. So again, if you were able to start Hunter Henry and you just took that chance, you're feeling real good and you're probably moving on. Russell Gage has been the best receiver in the Falcons. I don't know what happened to Cordell Patterson, but he just is not getting involved. It would have helped if they would have got the touchdown on the 1-yard line, but I don't know what happened with that. But Russell Gage had 23.1 points. He had 8 receptions, 91 yards, and 1 touchdown, and he had a really good game. Josh Allen, though, continues to put up numbers every single week, and he's one of the best quarterbacks in the game. He had 210 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, and 32 total points. That's not bad at all, and I'll take that all day long from my man, Josh Allen. Amon St. Brown, I want to take a humble brag for this last week because I said to stream him, but I didn't start him in the 2 leagues that I got eliminated in. And if I would have started him, I would have moved on, and I would have been in the semifinals and the championship in all 4 of my leagues. And it's frustrating. I started him over Rondell Moore. I thought Rondell Moore was going to have a good game, but I don't know. The Lions cost us the playoffs, and I just cannot even believe the Lions players were having such good games. Amon St. Brown had 23 points. He had 8 receptions, 90 yards, and 1 touchdown. So if you were smart, unlike I was, and started St. Brown, you're probably moving on. Aaron Rodgers was the other reason why I moved on in one of my leagues. And Aaron Rodgers had a phenomenal game. He put up 268 yards. He had 3 touchdowns and 35.18 points. And hey, A-Rod, I'll take that all day long from you, my guy. But now that we talked about the studs of the week, let's do the rights and my bad and the humble brags and the things I got right and the things I got wrong from the first week of the NFL fantasy football round 1 of the playoffs. Tua Tagovailoa, he had 23 points last week, and if you started him, I told you to start him. The Dolphins defense also, I told you to start the Dolphins. They had a really good game. They didn't put up phenomenal numbers. They didn't put up like 30 points, but they had 13, 14 points, and hey, for a defense, I'll take that all day long. And my last humble brag, because I didn't have very many humble brags as I was looking at it last week, I'm like, dang, I didn't do anything right. And like I said, I want to put St. Brown in here, but I didn't listen to myself again. And he's a reason why if I would have started him, I would have moved on. It's just frustrating. But Cole Kmet on Monday night, I talked about him when we talked about the Monday night game. He had 6 receptions for 71 yards, and hey, 13.1 points from a tight end. I'll take that all day long. But now let's get into the biggest my bads, because last week I was so high on the Cardinals. Cardinals are going to steamroll the Lions. Cardinals defense needs to be started. Rondell Moore, AJ Green, Zach Ertz, James Conner, Chase Edmonds, everybody. And it just did not happen. The Lions came up and they showed, and they actually knocked themselves out of the first pick, and the Jaguars now have the first pick again. But it's just one of those things that we thought the Cardinals were going to go off and do their thing, and it just did not happen. And that's why they say it's any given Sunday and you just really never know what's going to happen in the NFL. Rashad Bateman, him and Tyler Huntley had a great game last week, but then all of a sudden this week he looks more towards Hollywood Brown and Mark Andrews, which was fine for Mark Andrews. But if Rashad Bateman would have had a better game, I also would have moved on in one of my games. If you guys can tell, I'm venting a lot about how I got eliminated, but that's what this show's about. It's here to help you get through the weeks, help you set your lineup, and have just some fun doing fantasy football. And if that's what you want to do, you could leave your comments and leave why you got eliminated in the playoffs. Or tell me why you moved on. Maybe Mark Andrews helped you move on too. And that's just what we do here on Tino's Time. We help each other out. But now let's talk about the 3 things that I learned from the first round of the playoffs going in to the second round, the semifinals, or the championship. The 3 things that I learned from week 16, the first round of the playoffs, is that trap games are real. Last week, we thought the Cardinals were going to go off and they were just going to explode. But it was probably the biggest trap game in the NFL season this year. The Lions have not won. They won 1 game. They tied a game. The season has been so bad. But they went out on Sunday with Craig Reynolds, a 3rd-string running back, St. Brown, Jared Goff, and a defense that was hungry, and they went out and showed why it's any given Sunday and any team can win at any time. So trap games are real, and you just have to remember that. The other thing I learned, Cordell Patterson and Jamar Chase. I need to worry about both of you. You guys were the 2 best players at your position, running back and receiver. Jamar Chase, you were in line to win Rookie of the Year. You were doing phenomenal things, but the last 3-4 weeks, Jamar Chase just has not been very good. Cordell Patterson has not been putting up the numbers that he used to in the middle of the season and early on in the season. Russell Gage has been more involved, and it's just one of those things. I'm starting to worry about you two, so they might not be must starts, and it's one of those things you really have to think about, and I have to think about it in one of my leagues, because if I want to make the championship, I might have to sit Jamar Chase and Cordell Patterson, and I can't even believe I'm saying that in the semifinals, because if it wasn't for these two, I wouldn't even be in this position. COVID-19 is just, it's crazy. You never know. It's still around, people. We're seeing new strains. And, I don't want to get too involved in it, but it's just one of those things that you always have to keep an eye on, because guys are, like I said, guys have been added, put on. There's been over 100 players at this point now in the last 3-4 weeks that have been added and put on, and over, coaches, staff members, everything. So you just have to remember and keep an eye on the COVID list and just everything, because there's big names on it like Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Harrison Buckner. I saw Jared Goff go on it this morning. I've just seen so many guys I can't even name on the top of my head, and there's too many names to write down, and I could do a whole podcast about the people on the COVID list, and nobody wants to do that. So just keep an eye on it, and just remember, COVID is still a huge thing right now in the world. But now that we talked about the 3 things that I learned, let's start talking about round 2 of the playoffs. You got past round 1, you knocked out a person, you either had a first round bye, whatever it may have been, but now it's either down to the semifinals or the Final 4, or you're in the championship, and this is the last week to set your lineups. You're trying to take all that money from your friends. So let's not waste any more time, and let's get ready to preview round 2 of the NFL fantasy football playoffs after we got just done recapping round 1. Let's start off round 2 with some bold predictions. David Montgomery is going to have a phenomenal game versus that Seattle Seahawks run defense. He's going to have 150 yards and 2 tutties. He might even have more. And what, the Bears might win a game? Maybe. Now the Bears have been officially eliminated. There's no more. Bears have a way to make the playoffs. Let's be real, people. The Bears have been eliminated from the playoffs for the last 3 weeks. But that don't mean David Montgomery can't still go out and ball out. My biggest bold prediction might be, though, people, the Lions are going to win again. The Lions are going up against the Falcons, and this might be a good matchup for the Falcons and Cordell Patterson and everything. But we saw what the Cardinals did, and the Falcons aren't the Cardinals. So I'm calling it, and if I do call it, next week on my show, we'll be saying a little bit of a humble brag, and I might be even starting the show off, and I might be doing a celebration dance that the Lions win again, because it's just something that I'm going to call right now. my last bold prediction for round 2 of the fantasy football playoffs. It's Mac Jones and Josh Allen in a divisional matchup for a team to see who's going to either win the division, where they're going to be placed, because the playoff seeding and everything is just crazy right now. But Mac Jones and Josh Allen in that game are going to combine for 800 yards and 6 touchdowns. That means they're both going to throw for 403 tutties, and that game's going to be a completely fantasy bonanza. So if you have any of those guys on the Patriots and Bills, I'd start all of them. But now that I gave you my bold prediction, let's start getting into all the guys you need to pick up, start, sit, stream, and then let's get into your flex options and and then the fantasy gold games. So let's get into the waiver wire pickups, and these are my top 5 waiver wire pickups for the second round of the fantasy football playoffs. I just talked about the Bills and Patriots game. Gabriel Davis has had I think he's had 5 touchdowns in the last 3 games. I know he had 2 last week, and then he had 2 this week, so I know he's had 4. I'm not sure if he had 1 before that, but either way, Gabriel Davis has been one of those guys. With Emmanuel Sanders out this past week, Gabriel Davis had a really good game, and now he gets to go up against the Patriots, and yes, the Patriots defense is good, but Josh Allen's one of the best quarterbacks in the league this year, and so if you need a wide receiver and you're struggling with COVID and everything going on, go pick up Gabriel Davis. Number 4, Duke Johnson. Duke Johnson was like the 3rd best running back this week. He put up 20-plus points, and he might be the guy. Yes, they still got Myles Gaskin and everything, but this is for deeper leagues, and I got to make sure I help everybody out. So if you're in a deeper league, go pick up Duke Johnson and possibly start him this Monday night versus the Saints. Amon St. Brown, he's put up 15-plus points the last 3 weeks. Again, a guy, if I would have started him, I would have been moving on in 2 of my leagues, but I didn't, and that's just what happens. But if you're still alive, go pick up St. Brown, and I'd think about starting him in a flex option this week, or maybe even a wide receiver too. I might be thinking about starting him over Jamar Chase. I don't know. The Eagles, we talked about it. Mike Glennon's going to be the starter for the Giants. So if you have the Eagles defense, feel good about starting them this week versus the Giants. My number 1 waiver wire pickup for the second round of the playoffs is Ronald Jones, Rojo, with the news of Leonard Fournette possibly being out a few weeks. Ronald Jones becomes that guy, and not saying Giovanni Bernard isn't going to get involved in everything, but Ronald Jones had a really good game after Leonard Fournette left, and he seemed like he was involved the most. So I would definitely consider starting him this week and pick him up and make sure you get him on your team, so then your opponent doesn't, and then you're sitting there like, dang, I should have got Ronald Jones. But now that I gave you my top 5 waiver wire pickups, let's talk about my top 5 my top 5 flex options for the second round of the playoffs, because we got to keep giving you names. I got to keep shooting out names, because every guy and every point matters, and I learned that hard last week because I had 50 points in one of my leagues sitting on my bench. My number 5 flex option of the week, it's another deeper league, and it's a streamer from the Buccaneers, Scotty Miller. With the news of Chris Godwin being out for the season, Scotty Miller becomes that guy that could possibly step up in the slot option. And if you're in deeper leagues, 12-team leagues, or if you're struggling at wide receiver 3 or flex, Scotty Miller might be a good option. Darnell Mooney versus the Seahawks. Justin Fields and Darnell Mooney have a great connection. So if you really, really need a flex option or a wide receiver 2 or 3, start Darnell Mooney. Number 3 flex option of the week, it's Allen Lazard versus the Browns. Last week, Allen Lazard had a really good game, and he took a lot of opportunities away from Davante Adams to the point where Davante probably could have had a lot more points if MVS and Allen Lazard was not so productive. But MVS is another guy that I didn't mention that was put on the COVID list. So if he is also out, Allen Lazard becomes just a better play versus the Browns on Christmas Day. Russell Gage, number 2. He's been the best receiver for the Falcons lately, and he's been putting up double-digit numbers. So again, if you're missing and you're struggling and you don't know what to do about a Jamar Chase, or you're really struggling, I would definitely consider starting Russell Gage. I just talked about St. Brown. We're going to be talking about a lot about this guy because I want everybody to make sure they put him in his lineup this week. He's going up against the Falcons, and Jared Goff and him just seem to have a really good connection. He had 11 targets this past week, and then he had 8 receptions for 90 yards and a touchdown. So if you need a wide receiver, those are my top 5 flex options for the second round of the playoffs, and those are the guys that you can put in your lineup and feel good about putting and starting, and they're going to put up good points. But now that we talked about the top 5 flex options of the week, now let's go into the starts, the sits, and the streams for the second round of the NFL fantasy football playoffs. Let's start off with the starts, and then we'll do the sits and the streams. My starts at quarterback this week, it's Jalen Hurts versus the Giants. Jalen Hurts has a great matchup versus the Giants, and we saw what the Giants defense does, and Jalen Hurts is just going to run the ball up and down the field. He's like a running back and a quarterback, and we saw it last night versus the Washington FT. He just had a phenomenal game. Kyler Murray, yes, Kyler Murray did not have a great game. And yes, the Colts defense is very good, but we're going to keep Kyler Murray in our lineup. And, he doesn't have DeAndre Hopkins still. And, it's one of those things that it might be a scary matchup. But in reality, unless you have if you have Kyler Murray and Tom Brady, I would maybe start Tom Brady over him. If you have somebody like that, or, if you were able to stack 2 really good quarterbacks, then maybe. But if you weren't lucky enough, you're not going to sit Kyler Murray for a guy like Baker Mayfield or somebody like that in the semifinals or the championship. You drafted Kyler Murray to be your quarterback, so you're going to start him unless you are really high and you really got 2 really good quarterbacks. The 2 running backs that I'm going to start this week is Michael Carter versus the Jags. That Jags run defense is awful, and the Jags are just awful. And Michael Carter has been the Jets running back that has been very productive this year. So start Michael Carter versus the Jaguars. Craig Reynolds, this guy came out of nowhere. He had a really good game a few weeks ago when Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift were both out. And then again this week when both of them were out versus the Cardinals, he had another really good game and he put up 13.80 points. And it's just one of those things that with running back position and how bad it is and everything going on, I think that it's going to be, you could start Craig Reynolds versus the Falcons this week. I can't even believe I'm telling people to start Lions in the semifinals of the championship. Christian Kirk versus the Colts. Kyler Murray needs somebody to throw to, and his favorite person to throw to without DeAndre Hopkins is Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk had a really good game last week, and I think it's going to be good versus the Colts this week. Jalen Waddle returns from the reserved COVID list, and it's 1 week too late for me, but if you're still alive, Jalen Waddle goes up against the Saints on Monday night, and I think that Jalen Waddle is going to come back for blood, and he's just going to have a phenomenal game on Monday night. So start Jalen Waddle this week. The 2 tight ends I'm going to tell you to start, Dawson Knox versus the Patriots. Dawson Knox has been the very underrated, very productive tight end that nobody saw coming, and he's just been very consistent this year. And again, with the news of Travis Kelce and all the COVID people, Pat Freiermuth on the concussion list, and all the injuries right now, start Dawson Knox in your fantasy semifinals or championship. Zach Ertz, he had a really good game last week, and he didn't have banger numbers. He didn't put up Mark Andrews type numbers, but he had a really good productive day, and that's going to continue this week versus the Colts. And yes, I'm very high on the Cardinals again this week, but I think that they got to bounce back, right? And if they struggle again, then next week you could yell at me even more, and we could I'm sure next week I'll say I'll sit Kyler Murray and everything, and next week will be the week that they go off. But I just cannot in my hearts of hearts sit Kyler Murray and then know if he goes off, he's sitting on my bench, and I'm just like, I don't know why I didn't sit, or why it's like Patrick Mahomes. You ain't going to sit Patrick Mahomes ever, people. The defense that you need to stream this week, I talked about them a little bit earlier. They were my number 2 waiver wire pickup. It's the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Giants. The Philadelphia Eagles had a really good game. They didn't do great last night versus the backup quarterback from Washington, Gilbert, but they still had an okay game, and now they get to go face Mike Glennon. Saquon Barkley is just not what he once was this year, and maybe that's just because of the injury and everything. But even like next year, and like when we talk about it and as we get on and after the season and after everybody wins their championships and I do my final goodbye for fantasy, I'll tell you guys that I think that we should stay away from. And he's just one of those guys that I think we really need to stay away from next year, because the running back position and every position, honestly, people might draft Cooper Kupp too high next year, and it's just one of those things. It's always people every single year. I'm telling you, people, there's a guy this year that is doing really good, but next year he's going to have banana type numbers like Cooper Kupp, and then it's going to be like, oh my God, why didn't I think about taking him? It happens every year, and I'm not saying Cooper Kupp's going to fall, but I just think that, it's just one of those things. So I don't know who's going to be the first overall pick next year. Please, for the love of God, don't make it be Cooper Kupp, because if it is, and everybody's just going to be mad, maybe Jonathan Taylor, Austin Eckler, those are my two options right now. But I got a little bit off track, and let's get back to the sits, or the start, sits, and streams, and let's talk about the sits of the week and the guys that you need to keep out of your lineup, and I just cannot put them in my lineup this week in the fantasy championship or semifinals. Kirk Cousins versus the Rams. Kirk Cousins didn't even throw for 100 yards versus a Bears secondary that had fourth-string players on it, and the Bears defense just made Kirk Cousins look like a high schooler, and somehow the Vikings still won. But now he's going up against that nasty Rams defense, and you saw what they did to Russell Wilson last night, and it's just not going to be much better for Kirk Cousins. Taysom Hill, I love you, my man, Taysom, but I cannot trust you right now, and you're going up against the Dolphins on Monday night. I thought you were going to do good versus the Buccaneers, and you didn't even get 10 points. So I'm sorry, Taysom Hill, I just cannot trust you right now. Chuba Hubbard versus the Buccaneers. We saw what Alvin Kamara did versus the Buccaneers, and Chuba has not been as good as he was in the beginning of the year. Amir Abdullah has been getting involved a lot more in the passing game, and it's just something, like I said, right now, people, we got to make sure that we set the perfect lineup, because it's do or die. Like I said last week, it's do or die. If you don't make it, you don't make it, and you go home. And if you lost last week, that's what you're doing. You're sitting at home. Hopefully you're like me and you do like 5 or 6 leagues, so then at least you move on in some of them, right? But I just cannot trust Chuba Hubbard this week. Duke Johnson, I know I talked about him, and I know I told you to pick him up, but unless you're completely desperate, I would not start Duke Johnson this week. I just cannot trust him versus the Saints, and it's just one of those things. He had a phenomenal game last week, but last week was weird, people, and I'm hoping this week everything goes back to normal. But again, who knows? But I'm not relying on Duke Johnson to lead me to a championship or lead me to a title. Brandon Ayuk, he's had up and down games. He's been up and down. He's been, oh, heck yeah, Brandon Ayuk. And then it's been, oh, yeah, Brandon Ayuk. And again, this week he's going up against the Titans. And Jimmy Garoppolo loves Deebo Samuel and George Kittle. So I just do not see Brandon Ayuk having a good game. But again, he could. And it's just one of those things, unless you have if you do have a better option, I'd sit Brandon Ayuk. But I don't know. Michael Gallup only had 6.1 points versus last week, and now he gets to go up against Washington. And not saying Washington's defense is great defense, but Dak Prescott, we know he loves Amari Cooper, Dalton Schultz, Tony Pollard, Zeke Elliott, all these guys, and just Michael Gallup gets lost in the shuffle, and I'm not relying on 7 points in the semifinals or the championship. The 2 tight ends that you need to sit this week, Ricky Seals-Jones. You were supposed to be this great tight end. You were going to put up great numbers versus the Eagles and that awful defense versus the tight ends. And you didn't have a horrible game, but you didn't have a game that was going to lead us to a championship or lead us to the semifinals. So I'm sorry, but I can't rely on you this week. Also, Tyler Conklin. Tyler Conklin was supposed to have a great game versus the Bears, and he didn't. We didn't even see KJ Osborne get involved. Justin Jefferson only had 4 receptions, and Kirk Cousins didn't even throw for 100 yards, like I said. So if I'm telling you to sit Kirk Cousins, I'm also telling you to sit Tyler Conklin versus the Rams. The Cardinals defense versus the Colts. We saw the Cardinals have an awful week last week versus the Lions, and I could be completely wrong. The Cardinals could go off and just beat the crap out of the Colts and just explode, and just, you never know what could happen. But I'm not relying on the Cardinals this week, especially when they got to go up against the other MVP of the league, Jonathan Taylor, and I think Jonathan Taylor is going to run all over them. So I'm just sitting the Cardinals this week. But if you are worried and you have any of those guys that you're sitting, let me tell you guys that you can stream this week and you can put in your lineup and you can feel good about, and you don't have to worry about, and these guys will help you move on to the championship, or they'll lead you to taking home that title. the streams now for week 16. Oh, I'm sorry, week 16. I'm sorry, I'm getting all types of confused. Week 16 and the second round in the NFL Fantasy Football Playoffs. Oh my God, people. I still get confused that we have an extra week of the football season this week. But back to the streams. My quarterback streams for the week, it's Trevor Lawrence versus the Jets. Trevor Lawrence has not had a very good season, and, it is what it is. But in 2 quarterback leagues, if you're struggling at quarterback and everything going on with COVID, and we don't know who's going to be able to play on a daily basis or even on an hourly basis, Trevor Lawrence is a good matchup versus the Jets. So I would definitely take advantage of it in 2 quarterback leagues. And now this one, you might be like, what? You want me to start these guys in the semifinals or championship? Again, this is for 2 quarterback leagues mostly. But the Browns quarterbacks, if it's Baker Mayfield or even Nick Mullins, we saw Tyler Huntley go out and put on an absolute show on Sunday versus the Packers. The Browns get to go up against the Packers on Saturday on Christmas Day. We get football on Christmas Day. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to everybody. It's going to be a great day for football. We also get the Colts and Cardinals that day. It's going to be 2 great games. But if you need a quarterback in 2 quarterback leagues and you're worried, I would definitely consider starting Nick Mullins or Baker Mayfield, depending on who starts, and just keep an eye on that. Ronald Jones, Rojo, he was my number 1 waiver wire pickup, and I'm telling you to stream him this week, especially with the news of Leonard Fournette, and he gets to go up against the Panthers, and the Panthers has not been the defense that they were in the beginning and the middle of the season, and it's just one of those things that I just feel really comfortable starting Ronald Jones this week, especially if Leonard Fournette is out and he's got the GOAT, and it just that he's going to feast versus the Panthers. Deontay Foreman from the Titans going up against the 49ers on Thursday Night Football. Foreman had 15.6 points last week, and he looked like a little bit of a Derrick Henry out there. And speaking of Derrick Henry, there are some rumors and news that he could return from the playoffs. So again, if you have been eliminated, but if you are in a keeper league, I would definitely see how Derrick Henry comes back, because if he does come back and looks like he did in the beginning of the season, I would definitely consider keeping him in keeper leagues next year, because that's a great guy to keep, even if, it just, you got to build your team and think about next year, especially if you've been eliminated. So keep an eye on that, but I would definitely start Foreman this week versus the 49ers. My 2 wide receivers to stream this week, I talked about him also. My number 5 waiver wire pickup, Gabriel Davis versus the Patriots. He is a good matchup, and the Patriots are a good defense, but Gabriel Davis has been one of Josh Allen's favorite targets, so I would definitely consider streaming him this week. Van Jefferson didn't have a great game last night versus the Seattle Seahawks, but now he gets to go up against the Vikings, and we saw what Justin Fields did, and Justin Fields didn't even have a good game, but imagine if Van Jefferson and Matthew Stadford and Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp's going to probably put up 40 points because I'm facing him again in the semifinals in one of my leagues, and I just know it. Cooper Kupp's going to put up numbers. Van Jefferson's going to put up numbers. I would honestly start every receiver in that Rams receiving core. Odell Beckham, Tyler Higbee if he returns, even Sony Michelle or Darnell. I would start all the Rams, people. Just start all the Rams. But the 2 tight ends that you can stream this week, this depends on if Austin Hooper returns, but I'm telling you to start the Browns quarterbacks. I'm also telling you to stream the tight end for the Browns, Austin Hooper or David Ajoko. David Ajoko was the number 1 tight end for the Browns yesterday versus the Raiders, and he put up good numbers. He had 4 receptions for about 40 yards, and he didn't have a great game, but he didn't have a horrible game, and for a tight end, we always look for that, but I think going up against the Packers, the Browns are going to have to throw the ball, and that means more opportunities for Ajoko and Hooper. So either or, if Hooper returns off the injured or the COVID list this week, I would definitely consider starting either or. CJ Uzomah, this one is like, CJ has been up and down, and he's just, but it's so hard to find tight ends right now, and with the news of Travis Kelce and Darren Waller still out, and, it's so hard to find the tight end right now that we might need to rely on CJ in the fantasy semifinals or the championship. It just depends. But he has a good matchup versus the Ravens, and the Ravens have not been very good versus tight ends this year. So I would definitely consider streaming CJ Uzomah. The defense that I'm going to stream this week, it's the Chargers versus the Texans. The Chargers have been a very good defense, but the Texans have also been a very bad offense, and that's what we look for. We look for quarterbacks to turn over the ball. Davis Mills loves to do that up and down the field. So if you need a defense this week and you're freaking out and you don't know what to do and you don't have the Eagles or you don't have the Bills or whatever it may be, go pick up the Chargers and feel good about starting them this week versus the Texans. And those are my starts, sits, and streams for week 16, the second round of the fantasy football playoffs. Now that I gave you all the guys you need to start, sit, and stream, let's go into the 3 games that are going to be fantasy gold, and you need to start all these guys in all these games. The Saints versus the Dolphins on Monday night. That's going to be a game I think is going to be a complete shootout. I think Dolphins and Saints are going to run up and down the field. Taysom Hill might even run up and down the field, but I just don't want to rely on that on Monday night. Going into the semifinals or championship, I would just rather take the safe bet and start somebody else. So, but I would still, if you're desperate, I would still consider starting Taysom Hill, even though I told you to sit him. But on the other side of the ball, Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Waddle's returning, Myles Gaskin, Duke Johnson, if you really have to, Mike Gesicki. I think this is going to be a very underrated, very good game on Monday night this week. The Colts versus the Cardinals on Saturday night, on Christmas night. It's going to be a banger. It's going to be the game of the week, in my opinion, probably. Cardinals and Colts are fighting for playoffs. Cardinals got 10 wins. Colts got 9. Cardinals are slipping. Colts are flying. Jonathan Taylor's taking the ball to the house. It's so many great things happening. So start all your Colts and Cardinals this week and feel good about it. The last game of the week is going to be the Ravens versus the Bengals. And this one is like, why are you saying the Ravens and Bengals? This is the divisional matchup and everything like that. But I think it's going to be a shootout. I think that Lamar is going to come back and ball out. I'm sure Bateman, now that I don't have to worry about Bateman in any of my leagues because I don't have him in the 2 I advanced in, I'm sure he's going to go off and have a great game. Devontae Freeman's been very good. Mark Andrews needs to go out and have another 30-point game for me. It's just going to be a really good game. And for the love of God, Joe Burrow, remember that you have Jamar Chase on your team and throw him the ball. But anyway, those games are going to be fantasy gold, so make sure you start all of those guys in the playoffs for round 2. And my last segment, like we always do here on Tino's Time, it's the 3 guarantees for the second round of the playoffs. Before I say goodbye and until next week. But my first guarantee, no one will want to win no one's going to want to win the Jaguars or Jets game. The Jaguars and Jets are fighting for draft picks, and nobody's going to want to win, in my opinion. I think this game could be whoever wants the ball. You take the ball. I take the ball. You take the ball. I take the ball. Nobody's going to want to win this game because at this point, those two are fighting for draft picks, and it's just going to be real interesting. Tom Brady is going to bounce back versus the Panthers. Tom Brady had a horrible game. He broke a tablet. He threw it. We saw memes about him on Sunday night. Tom Brady will bounce back versus the Panthers after that awful game versus the Saints. Jonathan Taylor is going to go off on Christmas night. He's going to have an Alvin Kamara type night versus the Cardinals like Alvin did on Christmas night last year versus the Vikings. Jonathan Taylor's going to go off and he's going to lead you to a championship, or he's going to lead you to bring you and put you into the championship. And those are my 3 guarantees for week 16, the second round of the fantasy football playoffs. And there you have it. I've given you all the information I possibly can. We've recapped week 1 of the fantasy playoffs. We've previewed week 2. I got you ready to set your lineups and all the guys that you need to put in, take out, stream, put just everything. I gave you all the information I possibly can, and now it's up to you. Like I said, I'm in 2 of 4 leagues still. I got eliminated in 2, like I said, but that's okay. I'll be doing some scouting for those 2 next year, and I'll be trying to win the championship in one of my money leagues, and the other one is just for fun. So I hope everybody advances. I hope all this information helps. Don't forget to go smash that subscribe button. Go like, follow at TinoTime1996. Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, all your social medias. Everywhere you listen to your podcast. I hope everybody has a safe and happy holidays. Merry Christmas from everybody here at Tino's Time. Please, everybody, wish me luck. I got to go get my wisdom teeth taken out tomorrow. I'm very scared. So leave some prayers and thoughts in the comments. And until next week, when we recap week 2 of the fantasy football playoffs, and I preview week 3, the championship or the semifinals, this is your boy Tino, signing out.